Okay, well, let's go ahead and get started. Um, Thank all of you for being here. Look forward to our time together. So thank you and for everything you guys are doing. Um, so this session is called Focusing on Forgotten, How a Focused Target Can Foster Innovation. I'm Wesley Meekum. So just to kind of give myself an introduction here, I am a UX designer and co-founder at Pulse for Good. I've been doing UX design for about 12 years now, a little over 12 years, ranging from a wide variety of applications for, a lot of them for the federal government, some for state government, private businesses. A little bit about me personally: I'm an avid golfer, board gamer. I love reading, and I have 4 kids that keep me very busy. Little introduction for Pulse. What we do is we help organizations gather client satisfaction feedback through on-site kiosks and online surveys. Now, sometimes when I explain this, it feels a little simple and straightforward, but the journey it took us to get to that simple and straightforward approach is kind of what I wanted to go over today, and how it didn't start that way, and it took a little bit of iteration and honing of what we wanted the target to really get to that. At Pulse, our mission is to improve the world's most important organizations. We are devoted to helping vulnerable communities, individuals that are in vulnerable situations, such as those that are experiencing homelessness, those that are struggling with mental or behavioral health. And we want to provide them a safe place that they can share their feedback and to help those organizations that are serving them. So, and how we got to this mission is part of what I wanted to go over today. So I'm going to start out with how we started, because we didn't start with how we are now. I'm sure you've seen that trend that's going on online where you'll see celebrities post, that how it started versus how it's going. That's kind of how I wanted to structure this session. I want to talk about where we started and the changes that we made to get to where we are now, and how some of those helped us to be more innovative and to be able to better serve our users. Sometimes it can feel like Guy here, where we're throwing lighter fluid on the fire and things are getting out of control. But it's been a good experience and a good journey for us. So at Pulse, with my co-founders, there was 5 other co-founders with me. We were a bunch of friends, and we kind of wanted to do something on the side where we could do something that was fun, something where we could use our skills, and to also do something that could do some good in the world. A lot of us came from a software background, and in the software world, there's this concept of MVP, or minimal viable product. And so we were familiar with that, and we wanted to start with that. This quote that you see here, this is from Eric Ries. He wrote a book called The Lean Startup. That's a very good book about how to start a new company and to do it as responsibly as possible, with using the bare minimum of resources to get to the right answers quickly. He defined the MVP as the minimal viable product is that version of a new product which allows a team to collect the maximum amount of validated learning about customers with the least effort. So we knew that we wanted to do something similar to that. We wanted to use this approach. We used that before in our other jobs, and we wanted to use that as we started Pulse. The reason we wanted to do that is just what Eric Ries says, that it helps you to figure out those problems quickly and to learn as quickly as possible. And that was our goal. We'd used that before, like I said. We wanted to apply it to our experience with Pulse of doing something good. So here you can see are some examples of how we started out drawing pictures on whiteboards, some real basic UI mock-ups. And we started out with a fairly simple MVP. We knew we had the problem that we wanted to tackle of gathering feedback. So that was a minimal product. That was a minimal idea. It was a product, and it may or may not have been viable. At this point in time, we didn't know, and that was part of our problem. We were missing something in this process, where we were doing something on our own, and we weren't with a company that signed a contract with people that wanted us to build something. This was just something that we wanted to put out into the world. There was something missing, and it was reflected in our designs that we kind of lacked some direction. So we had a product, but we were missing users. We didn't know who we were designing for. We didn't know who we were building this for. So we failed to consider, what they needed, because we just didn't know. We had this weird amorphous user that we wanted to, help people gather feedback. But we didn't know anything about these people. We were trying to be too general. Throughout my career in UX, I've had multiple companies that have asked me to, hey, could you map out your UX process for us? And more often than not, that would end up in just this nasty diagram that had arrows and circles and all sorts of contingency plans to map out every conceivable outcome that could happen with with the UX process. Finally, one of my coworkers and I, we finally sat down and we came up with a very simple solution of what the best way for us to map out our UX process, and that is learn, create, share. So by learning, you're learning what the problem is, you're learning about your users, creating, you're building something, either a prototype or an actual product, and sharing, you're showing it to people, you're testing it with users, with anyone that you can. So this is the way that we've liked to work. However, with our new company of Pulse, we didn't know who we were learning from, and we didn't know who to share with. We were missing that user. Cameron Chapman, who wrote a couple of design books, he said that one way to think about customer needs is to focus on their pain point. A pain point is the aspect of the problem that causes the most distress for the customer. When the designers focus on that, they can get to the root of the issue faster and find unique solutions. But without a defined user or someone we even knew, we were struggling with how to focus on that pain point. We didn't know our users, and so we couldn't struggle on their pain points, and we couldn't find out how to innovate and make life better for them. So now I want to talk a little bit about how it's going now, how we got to where we are now. That's kind of how we started, and the problem that came up, what made us change to get to the point we're at now. So after a while of kind of floundering with that general solution, and we even got to the point where we had started building code, putting in code, and had some designs, but like I said, it felt like we were floundering. So after a while with that, we were actually approached by somebody from the city of Seattle, and they were working on trying to improve their homelessness problem. And they were having a lot of individuals that were having bad experiences going through homelessness and experiencing that terrible situation. They were trying to capture feedback from these people, and they were struggling. So we talked with them on the phone for about an hour. We were listening about their pain about gathering this data. They shared with us kind of what they were doing, and the image that you see there, that's kind of, they were working on some paper surveys, but really just struggling with this problem. So after that phone call, we decided to kind of check that premise and talk to some more people. So we talked to some more people. We talked to someone that was struggling with this similar situation in Utah, that was trying to gather data on those individuals experience homelessness. When we talked to them, they had similar pain points. I remember after those conversations, we were sitting around in an unfinished basement, and we looked at each other and we kind of talked it over, be like, okay, we've talked to a few people. This would be a bit of a change from a generic solution to a more specialized solution for focusing on these individuals experiencing homelessness or other vulnerable populations like that. But what we decided is that we should go for this. This should be something that we focus on because of that problem. Or before, we had no users, and here we'd actually talk to people that had problems we could understand and could design towards and hopefully make things better. So we made that choice. We pivoted, and we went ahead and started redoing our MVP to focus on that problem of capturing data from vulnerable populations, whether that be individuals experiencing homelessness, people going through mental or behavioral health challenges, anywhere where there are vulnerable populations. That's who we wanted to focus on. What that did for us is, instead of having this amorphous user that we didn't know anything about, we went to having users like Curtis here. Curtis is a real person. Curtis is someone I can go talk to and find out his pain points. It's somebody that we can understand and have empathy for and gain context to his situation. I want to play a video real quick here of Curtis. So let me get this going.
Being here is a good deal. I mean, there's a lot of good staff members, and they treat you like a human around here. They don't treat you like you're just kind of like a homeless person. When I was reading through the questions, I stopped and looked at them real carefully and slow, and I was like, hey, you know what? I got some input here, maybe they'll hear me and do something about it. And they have. The directors and staff, they'll get a chance to hear that and hear my concerns. It's kind of nice to be able to have some input and be heard.
So I love that video because it helps show that this was a person that had some input, but was struggling getting that input heard. And that's a user. That's a user you can get your arms around, you can get your mind around, to understand and to design towards. So now we had some problems. And I say that, but we had the good kind of problems, where before we didn't really even understand our users' pain points or their problems, because we didn't understand our users. Now we had some users that we could actually understand. So I want to talk a little bit about those pain points, and go through and talk about how understanding and focusing on this particular group of users helped us to understand their problems and gave us something to design towards that we never would have thought of before. So, for instance, one of the pain points that our user group has is it's hard to be vulnerable and honest. Imagine and I'm sure you've all had this situation where you go to someone's house, or someone's feeding you dinner, and you can tell that they've sacrificed a lot of time, effort, money to provide you with the meal. And then you go ahead and you eat the meal, and that meal's maybe not as good as, maybe it's not good. However, you understand the situation that they're in, and so it makes it hard to give that honest feedback, because you don't want to hurt their feelings, right? Now imagine that you are an individual that's experiencing homelessness. Imagine that the only meal that you are going to get is this one at a particular service provider. And if that meal's no good and they ask you about feedback on that meal, it's hard to be honest when that's literally the thing that's keeping you alive, is that meal, even though it probably could be better. And you had some feedback that food wasn't really good, but it is keeping you alive, and you don't want to offend them and hurt their feelings and have some fear of retribution. This is something that we've heard from a lot of our users, that they have a hard time giving feedback. And many of these service providers were trying to capture that data and that feedback about things like that, meals and other aspects of their facilities, in face-to-face interviews. And these people were explaining how hard that is to be honest when they're so vulnerable and to be honest for these services that are keeping them alive. And so they were giving feedback that wasn't as critical as they normally would have. So this gave us something, this was a challenge that we could design for and we could innovate towards. We understood the problem, and this kind of channeled our ability to innovate, where before this wasn't a problem. We didn't understand that. So one of the things that we did is we made it so we took some precautions in our application to make sure that anonymity was one of our guiding principles. We wanted to make sure that the feedback that people gave was anonymous, that it couldn't be tied back to them, and we wanted to make sure that they felt safe and comfortable giving that feedback. We also instituted kiosks that were at the service providers in those facilities, gave them the ability to give their feedback privately. We've tried to counsel the people that these service providers to put those in a place where they're not being constantly watched by staff members, so that these individuals can feel like they can give that feedback. And that's helped them to be able to feel a little confident and a little more comfortable. The service providers have noticed as well that the feedback that they are getting is a lot more candid, a lot more actionable, where before it was a little more blah. Now they're getting actual tangible things that they can act on. Another pain point that our users have is, I don't have a home, a phone, or a computer. So this is a problem that we had never thought about with our lame, ambiguous user that I talked about earlier, right? That guy didn't have this problem. We kind of just assumed that everyone had a phone. We all had phones. We all have access to computers and the internet. And we were kind of just going off our experience. Having this dedicated user group that we could focus on brought up this problem of these people sometimes, actually many times, don't have a home. They don't even have a phone or a computer or anywhere reliable to take a survey that isn't available to in another way. Many surveys nowadays, many survey applications focus on delivering their survey and capturing their data remotely, digitally, through phones or through surveys that are delivered to a phone or to a computer through an email. But that was a huge pain point for these users because they didn't have those things. So that was another problem that we could solve, another one that we could innovate towards. So we did things like I mentioned before, providing kiosks at the location. We also provided the ability to do them digitally, but we found that kiosks mounted in the actual physical location outperformed the digital ones by 10 to 1. These people that didn't have that ability were able to give that feedback while they were receiving those services. And it also meant that they could be honest with that feedback and give that feedback quickly, as opposed to kind of letting it sit for a week and then giving it later. They were able to give it, right after their experience. So discovering these problems also opened up other problems that we hadn't thought about and wouldn't have thought about otherwise. So things like having a mounted kiosk meant that it had to be out in the open, and we needed to adapt to that. We needed to come up with a way to secure our chargers. We needed to consider accessibility concerns. A person in a wheelchair can't access something if it's mounted too high for them. We needed to account for a wide range of reading levels. We needed to be able to account for those that read on a 12th grade level and those that read on a 3rd grade level. These were all pain points that we can now take into account to use as we were designing and honing our product. When we made that change and that shift to focus on these vulnerable individuals, This also gave us more users. So the people that were trying to gather this data now also became our users. So the service providers, these businesses, these people that were serving these vulnerable populations, they were our users now too, because they were the ones that were going to be consuming this data. So this opened up a whole nother user group for us, a whole nother user role that we could focus on. And they came with all their own pain points and struggles and things that we could learn from them. So for instance, a service provider, I want to provide better service, but I don't know how. Well, like I said, a lot of these service providers are trying to do their best. Some of the best people I've met have been these people that work at these service providers. They often really care for these people, want to make a difference, but before they weren't able to get that feedback. They weren't able to get that. It's hard. Gathering data is hard. A lot of times these people that like their skills weren't in survey creation, their skills weren't in data aggregation or data analytics. They had other skills and resources that they were using, and a lot of times they were using up all their resources doing other things, they were extremely busy, they were stressed, and using all their resources and funds to try and make a difference. So we were able to take that to create solutions for them. We're able to create a data view for them that aggregates their data, gives them the ability to print that data so they can take it to other people, share it with who they want and need to share it with. They can analyze it without having to spend hours massaging and prepping that data. We also discovered that some of those users, like board members, CEOs, directors, they didn't have time to go into a dashboard and review that data on a consistent basis, right? They're being pulled in dozens of different directions. Not just running a homeless shelter, but also interfacing with government officials and funding resources. So they didn't have time to do that. So we found that providing them like a weekly email that gets sent out, that's kind of just a summary of the week, that met their needs perfectly. So we were able to kind of design around these users and provide for them these tools and these solutions. Another issue that they have is I need to prove that we need more funding. So a lot of these organizations that are serving these vulnerable populations work and receive either federal funding or private donations. And in order to procure some of those grants or those donations, they're asked a lot of times to provide proof for that. And that kind of makes it hard for them, especially when they're having an issue and they want to show that they need funding for this because it's something they're not doing good. They need to be humble and honest with themselves and the people that they're approaching, that they have room for improvement. So this allowed us as well to solve this problem for them. Now we don't solve it completely. We do what we can, but what we've done is we've given them the ability to show how things are going, where they're lacking. We had one service provider that they ran out of funding for a janitor service that they were using. And then after a couple of months, they were able to pinpoint on their graph, on the dashboard, that, hey, our cleanliness scores have gone down, and they've been consistently going down. They were able to take that to some funding sources and say, hey, ever since we lost that funding for that janitor services, our cleanliness has gone down. We haven't been able to keep up with the problems. And using that data, they were able to get more funding and be able to hire that janitor service back. And then they were able to see the improvement that came with that. They were able to see their cleanliness score go up, and they were able to show that to the funding source and say that those funds made a difference, and they are working to improve these lives. We also have the ability to provide for them stories. Many of these individuals that are going through these situations, want to have their stories out there. They want to have their stories heard. And so we give them the ability to type in some free text responses, and those stories help them to be um, more real, right? It's the data and the trends, the graphs and all that are good and provide very strong data points, but sometimes they lack some of the emotion. So for instance, I remember one of the feedback items that we got from a question that we ask at a lot of these places is, what do you wish was here? Now, a lot of times you get comments like, I wish there was a pool, or I wish there was, some outlandish comments. A lot of times you get other comments like, I wish we had more soap, or I wish we had shower curtains in the shower. And those have been things that these organizations have been able to act on. And they're like, okay, we've had a lot of people ask for this shower curtains. Let's put those in. And then there's other responses that they get. For instance, there was one to that question of, what do you wish was here? Someone wrote, I wish my mom was here. I missed her. She passed away a couple years ago, and her passing away kind of led me down this path to where I am now, where I'm homeless now. And I wish I had my mom. I know there's nothing you can do to bring my mom back, but you asked what I wish was here, and I wish my mom was here. I remember reading that as it came through and just being kind of hit with, that's a real person, and that's a real story of somebody that's struggling and hurting. And sometimes we can forget that when we're looking at the data. We want the data because data can tell a story, but we also want those human stories, and we don't want those to go away. And so that was something that we were able to focus on, to try and present back to those users. And doing that helped them to remember why they're doing what they're doing. Also help them to tell those stories as they are trying to make their services better, whether they're talking to staff or whether they are talking to government officials about why they should get more funding. They can share some of these stories and be like, this is why, because of this situation and these people that we're able to help. So in conclusion, I want to just talk about that for us. Now, this may not be true for everybody, but a lot of times in the tech world, the big score comes from having a general solution, a solution that can be used by everybody. It can maximize their market value, their ability to reach as many users as possible. Then get up to hundreds of millions of users, because they have this general solution that works for everybody. However, what we learned early on is that having a general solution sometimes makes it so that there's slices of users that aren't getting as good of a solution as they could get. And having a general solution isn't the only way to success and the only way to make a difference. So for us, by focusing on a smaller user base, we were able to innovate and solve problems unique to them. We went from, we want to gather feedback from people, to we want to provide a safe manner for vulnerable individuals to have their voice heard. Or we want to display the data, to we want to provide organizations the ability to improve their services for their clients and procure more funding. So for us, focusing on a smaller user base, which, like I said, in the tech world at large, sometimes they say, don't do, you want to service as many people as possible. But for us, focusing helped us be more innovative, helped us to come up with solutions that meet this smaller user base a whole lot better. And it also helped us to channel our passion. We wanted to do something that provided some good, and this allowed us to do that. So for us, tightening our focus helped us to see a group of people that is sometimes forgotten, sometimes pushed aside, and hopefully allowed us to help them get their voice back and to be heard. So thank you. Appreciate everyone here. We have some time now for for questions. If anyone has questions, I'd be happy to answer them, but thank you. Okay, if there's no questions, I'll hang on for a few minutes, but thanks for being here and attending. If you do have questions, I'll still hang on, but I hope you guys all have a good day and have a good week.
Hey, Wes, David here. So you've talked about sort of homeless people as being this vulnerable group. Do you work with other groups? Are you looking to expand in other groups that?
Yeah. So we initially started with that homeless group, and then realized that many other groups that are in similar vulnerable situations had very similar needs and pains. So we've expanded to mental health and behavioral health. So, individuals that are experiencing that and receiving services for mental health or behavioral health issues and concerns. So that's another group. Those are a couple other groups we've expanded towards. We also want to expand towards traditional healthcare. So like the patients are sometimes left in vulnerable situations. So that's one that we've had discussions on that we're working towards, but haven't quite gotten into yet.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, no problem. And of course, we're always open to other ones. We would love to expand into other vulnerable areas and help these people. So yeah, thank you. Great question. Any other questions or comments from anyone?
There's one in chat.
Oh. There's open up the chat. I lost my chat window and can't find it now.
Do you want me to read it out?
Yeah, that'd be great.
No problem. It's from Patricia. Says, sorry, apologies, do not have good audio. But I was wondering if you could talk about how you begin the process of getting an organization set up. Do you provide consultations?
Okay, yeah. So what we do once we get an organization, once we've met with them and they've agreed to use our solution, we'll meet with them, and usually myself and the other UX designer that I work with, we'll meet with them and discuss their issues, what kind of data that they're wanting to get from this solution, and kind of work with them on the questions that should be asked. And we've learned some things going on, having installed hundreds of these, that what are some of the best practices as far as question types, questions that should be asked, and what questions they should use. And then we'll take their feedback on what they're trying to gather and try to come up with the best solution for them. So kind of like a little consultation visit with them that takes a few minutes. We'll also work with them on, if we can, we'll go to their place and work with them on best places to put it, what we've seen work best, what we've seen be a little problematic about as far as where you put it, that kind of stuff, and go over kind of the installation of it. But once they've kind of agreed to, like, yeah, okay, that all sounds good as far as those questions and stuff, we ship them all the equipment, and it comes all packaged with everything they need, the kiosk, the iPads, the tablets, the stickers, the posters, all that stuff that they need to put it up on the wall and get it going. So once they get the package, they're ready to start getting feedback that day. Yeah, that's kind of how the process works.
Maybe I can follow up with a question on that. Then, yeah. Is there a sort of a minimum scale of size of organization that economically it makes sense to work with, or not? It might be confidential, but is there give us sort of a range of the sort of price points here?
Right. So we have customers from all different ranges, all different sizes, from, you know, companies that are, you know, have hundreds of millions of dollars that have 60 to 100 different facilities, to other customers that have one site and, you know, are operating with, you know, with 10 staff members, trying to utilize as many volunteers as they can, things like that. So as far as our pricing model, we do kind of scale up. You know, the more kiosks you buy, the more, you know, the more price savings per kiosk you can get. And but yeah, you know, you can go with just one kiosk and one dashboard, or you can do, you know, 40, 50, 100, whatever. And those would be different prices for them. To get a more detailed breakdown of the price, you can just go to pulseforgood.com. There's a pricing tab on there. But yeah, it has worked for any kind of size of organization. Some of the larger organizations have had some interesting things that we've had to design for, such as, you know, centralized management that wants to look at data across, you know, 40 different sites, as opposed to the one site that just needs to look at their own site. But it's worked good for any of them, and really it works good for anybody that wants to gather this data without using up any of the resources. So a lot of times people see, you know, like, oh, this would be one more thing we have to pay, where sometimes they forget about that. If you have somebody walking around with a clipboard, you're paying that person usually to do that. So this is something that can free up that person's time and allow them to do other things. So no matter the size of your organization, if you're looking to gather client satisfaction feedback, it's proven to work really well for big, small, medium companies and organizations.
No, thanks.
Yeah, thank you. That was a good question. Any other comments, questions? I do have my chat up now. I did find the chat window, so if you wanted to chat it too, I can see that now. Okay. Well, like I said, I'll continue to hang on, but thanks everyone for attending. Hope you have a great day.